Let's start now talking about the risks in digital world and the challenges for building protection systems in the era of digital ECA. We have Professor Sonia Livingstone with London School of Economics and Political Science, a very well-known international researcher about children and the digital world. Welcome. Now, to be the moderator, I would like to invite Enrique Falhaiba. He is board member of CGI.br. Our panelist, Shadiel Alinklar, who is a state representative, Bruno Bioni with Data Privacy Brazil, Francisco Brito Cruz with IDP, Maria Eduarda Sintra with Google. Enrique, the moderator, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. An honor moderating this discussion. State Zadiel could not join us because of other appointments he had agreed on taking part. We are going to have a multi-stakeholder discussion, which is part of what we normally do at CGI.br. We have the private sector, we have the public sector, we have the academia, and we also have here with us receiving a keynote speaker as qualified as Professor Livingston from the local London School of Economics, one of the most knowledgeable specialists in the area of protection of children and adolescents. We are going to start with Dr. Livingstone's presentation, and then we are going to hear our panelists. It's important to say that in this panel, we are going to talk about risks, all of those risks that are being faced by the digital ECA, but building up on what we've been discussing, we also talk about the challenges of enforcing the legislation and also having appropriate regulation, engaging the society. This was a bill of law that heard all the society, everyone was involved, but we know that to succeed, we need to keep on listening to all the players. So we are going to start by now having Professor Livingstone's presentation, and then we are going to focus on the risks of implementation and the importance of the ecosystem. So now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you today, even if not. I was in Brazil summer and very much wish I could also be here today. But anyway, this is an important day for Brazil, an important new piece of regulation that many are watching. And I would like to share with you some of the research and some of the framing as I see it and as I've been discussing with colleagues in Brazil over the last years. So let me share my slide and just make sure that you can see this. I hope it hope it looks good at your end. So my name is Sonia Livingstone. I sit here in London, but I try to work as a researcher in relation to children's online risks and opportunities, protections, and rights. And I do so as internationally as I can manage by working with colleagues, for example, at NIC.br and also at the Alana Institute in Brazil, as well as colleagues in other parts of the world. So our research centre, as you can see, is hosted at the London School of Economics. It is joint with the Five Rights Foundation, which advocates for children's rights in the digital environment. And I'm going to say a little also about our research on Global Kids Online, of which Brazil has been a founder partner. And which was originally funded by UNICEF and We Protect. So, many of us for many years have been trying to build the research base, the evidence that can inform the kind of legislation that you have now just passed in Brazil. And it has been a growing effort by researchers and research funders in many different countries under the heading of children's rights in the digital age to really try to gather the research results, and also to develop the tools, the methods by which we can get representative, comparative, reliable, ethical research findings. And so everything we do is about generating the research findings and also about building capacity, because the evidence that has led to a new law in Brazil now, we hope will also lead to laws in many other parts of the world. And one message I have for today really is to say that this week the world is watching Brazil as you make children's lives more rights respecting, safer in the digital environment. But we hope that Brazil will also be a case of good practice that others can then learn from. And as you can see from our Global Kids Online website, we have research coming from many parts of the country, parts of the world. Most recently, in fact, from the Latin American countries. And when I came last year, I heard the latest results from Brazil, also from Argentina, where there was a lot of talk about gambling being an increasing risk of harm for children, and also from Bolivia. We have so many different research reports, and I just point you to a few. These are really to show how each country's findings sits within findings from many other countries, to allow us to begin to draw some international conclusions, perhaps even global conclusions, about how the risks to children, the risks of harm to children online are growing. But also there are many opportunities, and the challenge is not simply to turn the internet off for children because of the risks. Done, which is so exciting. So as I mentioned, we all pay a close eye on the risks reported in Latin American countries. The work that CGI.br does is unique in surveying children every year. So you have a unique perception of the time trends, the growing risks, which is incredibly important, and also a lot of research from other countries that show a similar picture or a different picture. Very often what we see from research from Latin America is the very strong inequalities among children from urban and rural areas, or different parts of the country, and how important those inequalities are in making a difference to children's digital lives and the support, the help that they can gain. As you probably know, very recently, the Disrupting Harm Project just a few weeks ago reported on the latest findings in Brazil in relation to forms of technology facilitated sexual exploitation and abuse. And as that shows, in fact, exposure to pornography, to inappropriate sexual content was the most common. But there were lots of worrying cases, lots of evidence of different kinds of risk. And the Disrupting Harm Project is very brave in asking children really difficult questions about the kinds of exploitation and abuse, and detailed questions. Who is it committed by? Somebody known to the victim. Do the children tell about it? Not often enough for us to be able to help them. There are so many areas where we need work in addition to regulation. Everything that I do and everything that we do within Global Kids Online is framed by the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I wanted to put this diagram here, as I often do, to remind us that child protection needs to be included within a wider framework of all the different rights. Of course, Brazil has ratified the convention and very often adopts policies which respect the rights of the child. This means there are implications for the responsibility of parents for children's privacy, as was just being discussed in relation to age assurance, children's freedom of thought and expression, and so forth. And as I hope everyone here knows, much of this is also expressed within the general comment number 25 on how the convention applies specifically in relation to the digital environment. So many of the requirements there for states, and indeed also for businesses and for civil society, many of them are described within that relatively short document, and it's exciting to see progress being made in Brazil. I wanted to say just something about how widely the problems are felt. This was the consultation among children that was held in 26 countries around the world to inform General Comment 25. We've actually recently just consulted children around the world again, 5 years on, and distressingly, many of the stories are still problematic. Much of what children has to say is still disturbing, and they are being faced every day with risks which they struggle to deal with, or which they cannot deal with, and which often their societies cannot support them with. These are problems which are risks of harm which are experienced in different ways, in different contexts, with different norms, with different values, but they are really being experienced everywhere. High income countries, middle, low income countries, urban, rural, you name it. The internet is now everywhere, and the problem, of course, it needs cultural specificity in the solutions, but it needs those everywhere. So in General Comment 25, there's careful work in explaining the ways in which the digital environment is adding to and extending familiar forms of violence against children. None should be familiar, but they are, sadly. There's careful work there in explaining how digital technologies offer new pathways to abuse and to victimization that need very specific and very carefully tailored management and mitigation. And so that sentence in paragraph 82, state parties should take legislative and administrative measures to protect children from violence in the digital environment. This is exactly what I understand that you have done this week. And I just note the requirement also for regular review. You will need to continue to update. You will especially need to enforce the legislation that is now in place. And there are a whole range of ways in which we want to use the research to benchmark how improvements can be shown, so that and I hope you have an evaluative framework, an evaluative process underway to see how, as it were, the risks reported last year, we hope, will be less next year. And I think, just to quote from one more part of the general comment, I think so many of those rights that children have can seem to be in contradiction let's say, between protection and freedom of expression, unless we manage this legislation and regulation in very careful ways, because children also have the right to access the internet, to express themselves in the internet. And this can be most important for children in disadvantaged or vulnerable situations. So I think it is right that the conversation is not only about the overall importance of regulation, but also the ways in which those measures, filters, age restrictions, age appropriate provision, training, safety measures, safety by design, all of those need also to be conducted in ways which are rights respecting. So there's nothing easy about this, as you will all very well know. I think my last quote now from General Comment 25 is to point out how the digital environment is constantly evolving and expanding. When we began our research on Global Kids Online 10 years ago, we were not thinking about artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence brings a whole new set of ways in which the digital environment can empower children, but very often puts them at risk of harm in new ways. So the challenge is, it seems, endless. And I thought I would show you what I thought was a very striking graph from UNICEF on how very recently, in the last 20 years, we have all, whatever part of the world, the internet is now everywhere for children. And where there used to be very notable differences, even quite recently, according to different parts of the world, 15-year-olds, this is data from PISA, 15-year-olds around the world are accessing it at scale, often in countries which have not yet undergone the kind of maturity of research and regulation that is evident in Brazil. But the internet is the internet, and the experience is connected. And so the risks that are allowed to thrive in some parts of the world matter for children also in Brazil, and vice versa. The connectivity of the space is super complicated for any one government, and that's why something like that's why the UN approach is so important, to coordinate and ensure a connected response to the threats as well as the opportunities. So I was asked to say something about the kind of the 4 C's of risk, and I thought this ever-changing digital environment is a good way of illustrating this point. So we have been, and I think many of us have been debating, how do we understand the different kinds of risk that arise when children have access to digital services of different kinds? And 20 years ago, the research was largely about the content risks, how digital content of pornographic content or hate content, harmful content, put children at risk. The contact risks was also very early on the agenda. The ways in which access to platforms allowed strangers to contact children in ways that is risky and often harmful. And I think this, even though we know it, when I look at the statistics from TIC Kids Online, when I look at the statistics from Disrupting Harm or other research, over and again, we do see that these contact risks remain significant, perhaps are increasing, and they are linked in various ways to the operation of the platforms that connect people at scale, sometimes anonymously, often without a knowledge of who is an adult and who is a child. And so I think it's appropriate that the focus for a long time has been on the abusive adults, but more recently has really turned to the operation of the platforms and the way in which the platforms enable or facilitate or host these contact risks. The conduct risks are also significant, and the UN has recently produced a new report on cyberbullying, which amplifies the harm of offline bullying, and the peer-to-peer element is often the most difficult, I think, for legislators, law enforcement, and civil society to manage, because we need a rights respecting way to respect that children are children, but children can also be perpetrators. But there's no question the most recent attention in the last 5 to 10 years has been on what we're calling the contract risks, the ways in which there are direct risks of harm that link the digital providers and children. And here this is exactly about the kinds of data processes that have been drawing attention in your new legislation, the importance of data protection impact assessments as a way of understanding how data, how contracts, how the direct connection between providers and children can put children at risk. And of course, the way in which data is used to fuel and personalize algorithmic feeds is at the heart of the problem, and I very much hope at the heart of the solution that you are building in your regulation. So all of this is to say that the internet, in addition to the bad actors who operate online, the internet has in crucial ways itself been recognized as risky by design. This is a phrase that the Five Rights Foundation use to kind of contrast with the calls for safety by design, privacy by design, the idea of designing digital services with children's rights in mind, and their right to protection, their right to privacy, but in fact all of their rights. So I'm conscious of time and the importance of the debate. So I just wanted to throw a few thoughts into the panel discussion that we will have next. The first was to point out a few of the reports that we have done at our centre, which I hope suggest some further tools, because further tools will be needed to implement the new legislation. One is the importance of child rights impact assessment. Which is a way of anticipating the risks and the impacts on children's rights before a new product, a new digital service reaches the market. And we have been tracking the way in which digital providers, companies, are increasingly operating child rights impact assessments. I would love them to do it more transparently, openly, so that we can all learn from the lessons that are uncovered. I wanted to draw attention to some research that we are now just updating on the impact of regulation itself on children's lives, and observe that we are finding ways in which regulation has positive impacts. Companies do respond to regulation. They don't respond enough, in my view, and in the view of many. And so the power of the regulator to ensure that companies are compliant is going to be absolutely crucial in the coming months and years. And there are two kinds of impacts that are difficult to measure. One is the impact on companies, on how platforms are designed, and the other is the consequences ultimately for children. Are their lives better? These are both challenges. So recently we did a child rights audit. I wanted to suggest this as a possible way forward. We took some prominent uses of educational technology in use in Britain, and examined whether they do, in fact, keep children's data private, keep children safe, promote their learning, promote their opportunities. And we documented, as it were, from the outside, the ways in which the products work, but also the ways in which they don't work. And the last example I will give you to think about was some work we did for UNDP. This is called the Global Developers Insights into Child Rights by Design, where we interviewed developers, designers, product developers, testers, marketers, the people in the value chain who are creating digital products, and found that very often there are two problems. One is that the importance of privacy and safety and rights for children is low on the company agenda. And the second, that those who are designing and producing the products often just don't know very much about children. And so I think there is an enormous training and awareness raising and kind of resourcing challenge next ahead, so that those who are making products who are often experts in their own field also understand something about children. So I think I just have a few. Oh yes, I just wanted to quickly show you how we have in fact been working in relation to Brazil in our new report on tracking the impact of General Comment 25. We actually have a lot of research on how Brazil has been taking up and responding to this child rights agenda. Our colleagues at the Five Rights Foundation similarly have been looking at best practices for regulation around the world. And again, Brazil shows up here. With my colleague Ivelisa Fortim, we have been, or she has been looking at the gaming industry in particular and how well it operationalizes the 4 Cs of children's opportunities and mitigates the 4 Cs of risk. And we have recently also with Ivelisa Fortim been looking at children's responses to AI. So there are future challenges. There is also future research coming. As you will know, because this is your news, I thought that last comment, Brazil wants to reshape the internet for kids. The hard part just began. I thought this is really something for us to discuss. We are facing this also in Europe as we try to implement the Digital Services Act. There are similar debates in many parts of the world about how really this regulation can be made. And so my last slide is to remind us of what we are really trying to do in embedding children's rights by design to counter risky by design and to ensure that we have safety by design, we have privacy by design, we have the whole array so that children's rights can really be respected in a digital age. And with this, I want to acknowledge my team and thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for your broad perspective, emphasizing the importance of your work, Kids Online, ICTs, those researches, they were and they are still are very important for information survey, and that has fostered has paved the road for the release of digital ECA. We have distinguished participants here on site and online. Now, Professor Francisco Cruz, who is from EDP, and he's constantly helping to manage content and risks. We are short in time, so please, each of you have just 7 to 8 minutes to conclude your insights, because people will have to move to the Planalto where the next ceremony will take place. Okay, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am Francisco. I am a teacher at EDP. And I am here not just as a professor, but as advisor for human rights to the UN. And Professor Livingstone made my talk much easier as she has shared the most relevant event, which is the General Comment 25. And the message that I'd like to share is to adapt and update the international standard for human rights in the UN and to translate that to our audience and how those standards may help into the process, connecting to existing risk assessment and other important formulations. We know that digital access is part of our children's world, not just for learning, but also for entertainment. Children, they hold human rights and rights which are specific to children. And the 25 general comments published in 2021 connects children's rights to digital environment as well as other human rights also exercised by children with a number of relevant concepts. The idea of progressive autonomy and digital ECA is not a creator or developer of new human rights, but rather a tool which reinforces existing data protection and to new contexts. Therefore, it makes sense to connect that discussion to human rights protection. That I see that as an opportunity for Brazil to advance in the matter. The 25 general comments should be read by everyone so you can better understand the digital ECA. And there is a rather older document, but also very meaningful for the risk assessment discussion, which are the guidance principle for the UN. Such a document is not necessarily designed to the digital environment, but to other sectors where it makes clear that any company may impact human rights. Therefore, they have to assess their impact and their activities. And by implementing those principles, we have methodologies which have been already implemented by several sectors. We do need a due diligence in human rights. And how do you do such a due diligence? You have to classify risks, as Professor Sonia told us. You have to list the different types of risks. You have to design methodologies, indicators. I will exemplify one type of very interesting methodology, which may be an example. Stakeholder engagement between commons, inverted commas. What is that exactly? Companies sooner or later will consider how to reach entities that advocate for children. Children themselves, they have to know how they are using that. It's useless just to produce a policy which you believe will work out. No, you have to have a policy which will include possible risks and problems. In addition, that implies into an idea which is already embedded into digital ECA, where we have to discuss the design, which may be very complex to the sector as it generates costs and so on. But innovation versus protection to rights, well, that may be beneficial if people see things as being one related to another. And the efforts of the High Commissioner is to interpret that as a complementary It's also important to understand that sometimes some paternalist approach, they will not take into account the human rights in the children sphere, and also to understand the risk assessment to human rights, not only as to corporation practices, but at each phase of the state interference. Companies, they have to mitigate risks for human rights, but states, during their intervention to guarantee citizens' rights or to regulate our citizens' rights, that should also be aligned to interventions and aligned to accountability standards, transparency standards, as the state intervention, if not done well, may end up violating human rights or represent a risk to human rights.
Brazil has a history of participation, of listening to the civil society. The regulation is responsive. It brings this component on board, and this is a way of ensuring transparency and accountability of government initiatives. Another relevant point, just to wrap up my comment, is that whenever we are discussing the design of the platforms and the fact that the security has to be by design, it means that risk assessments have to be made. And human rights documents can be used as interesting methodology as a reference. With digital ECA, Brazil has the opportunity of showing an example, a best practice of how it can be done. It's important to mention that there is a dedicated department within the High Commissioner office in the UN that produces a number of documents, methodologies, that brings to the digital world the side that I am addressing, the by tech. So my recommendation is not only to analyze General Comment 25, but also the by tech material to understand how we can translate what is already existing. The interventions of companies can also affect other users. And if we misunderstand how things will be done, other users may be harmed as well. Coordinator Renata Miele, in her previous comment, made a differentiation between identification and age verification. If we mistake one thing by the other, potentially human rights, for example, privacy to your identification, may be impacted. And this is not what we want. We have to see things all together. Maybe I was more institutional than I normally like to be, but just recommending all the materials that are ready that you can use as a reference so that the enforcement of digital ECA can be based on ongoing international discussion and protecting human rights. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me now hand it over to Eduarda Sintra. She is with Google Public Policy, and similarly to other company representatives that we've heard today, they've been involved with CGI, with the Ministry of Justice. They've been part of the discussion. How can we implement the law that we have passed? Google, one of the companies involved in it. So let's hear what they've been doing to deal with these challenges. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Let me thank CGI. Thank you, Enrique, IDP, for hosting this beautiful event. I hadn't been to this venue yet. Really beautiful. Let's thank Chico, Bruno, and Professor Sonia Livingstone for her talk. It's crystal clear to all of us that we've faced a challenge The digital ECA is a landmark to the industry. It's very relevant for protecting children and adolescents in the digital platforms. There is the need to engage relevant stakeholders. Google has been doing that. We've been proved to be open and as a voice in the discussions with CGI, Ministry of Justice, Brazilian government, the head of staff, all different players that have been discussing how we can protect children and adolescents in the online world. The legislation started being discussed, what, for 6 months? It's not that much time until the enforcement, and it will really bring a technical challenge to all of us on the industry side. But we also have to understand and interpret the legislation per se. Sometimes there are some gray areas, and I hope the decree law that's going to be signed today in the afternoon can give us more guidance so that companies can be more effective in their initiatives. Google has been working on protecting children and adolescents, and we've been doing that for a long time now. Our approach is broken down into three pillars: protection, respect, and capacity building. We should think about the design when developing products, but you also have to respect the capability of children and train them to identify what's content of quality or not, so that they can understand complex concepts, but that deserve to be better understood by them for their better action in the ecosystem. In terms of protection, children need an extra layer of protection. Let me give you an example. Google Play. We do not allow anyone to purchase products unless they are logged in, preventing children from making purchase if they are not authorized to do so. Likewise, at YouTube, no one can have access to contents classified as 18 plus, which wouldn't be adequate to children and adolescents without login. And this is done through a mechanism. If I had a slide, it would be great to show you. Thinking about a pyramid, we try to check whether the person is a child or not. So first layer, self-declaration of the person responsible for the kid, so how old the kid is. Let's say a weak mechanism, right? Thinking about all the options. Second layer, there is a second mechanism, which is age inference, based on a model of machine learning. We can understand, based on behavior, whether the user, what is the age range of the user. If you are searching for real estate funding, you're not a kid. You are an adult trying to, let's say, purchase real estate. So this is the kind of information we use in the inference model. And finally, thinking about activities which are at higher risk, we have age verification, which is an additional layer. It is a model that requires enhanced control. We know there is no perfect model. I hope the decree law can also give us some more guidance on what would be the best tools. But we use risk-based approaches. We don't think it makes sense to have age verification with very data intensive model if there is no high risk associated with the activity. Of course, we respect the right to privacy, to autonomy, but combine that with other additional activities and layers. Age verification, in our opinion, should be made up of share responsibility players. What do I mean? There are service developers who understand what content is being provided. They are the companies that know more about control, what's going to be provided to the user. In, in turn, there are also public legislators and lawmakers which will determine what is appropriate or what's not. The government, of course, but also those that are part of the process of developing public policies. And finally, the platforms that should provide the right infrastructure and the right tool to provide the conditions for age verification. However, despite the shared responsibility, there is still a challenge of enforcing it all. Let me give you an example. YouTube. There are 500 hours of videos which are provided every minute. In addition to working preventively with developers, platforms, and existing mechanisms, we also need the reactive side of it, which is a report and removal of content, because no model is perfect. And this is provided in all our products. So you can report inappropriate, illegal content, and that would be removed. My time is almost up, but let me talk about the second pillar of our strategy, respect to the rights. In other words, the understanding that the family has of the child. And finally, the third pillar, which is capacity building. We really believe that it's important to train people because internet's part of the life of children, adolescent. They have to develop their knowledge about it, and they deserve content of quality. Google Play, for example, there is a dedicated tab with a content that is fully curated. This is high quality content, and this is the kind of content that we advocate for this specific audience of children and adolescents. Yesterday, the law came into effect. Today, we're going to have the signature of the decree law. Google have a Gov post. I would like you to visit and access it, thinking about additional initiatives that we've been putting in place once the digital ECA gets into effect. So a model with machine learning for products for the inference part, we are expanding access to developers. They have access to an API. This is a launch of this week based on our Play Store, a very important tool for the standards that will be determined by the decree law to be passed today. And we've also changed our policy in YouTube requiring parental approval for users below 14. Well, that's it. I would like to thank all of you for the opportunity to discuss. At Google, we always want to find better tools to control children and adolescents. We are a highly responsible company. We've been working for years, and it's not something that started when digital ECA was first brought to the market, but we are constantly wanting to provide better services and better products to our customers. Thank you. Thank you, Eduarda. Thank you for sharing what's being done this week. Let's now give the floor to our last speaker, Bruno Bioni. He is a lawyer. He's one of the founders of Data Privacy Brazil and a member of the National Committee of Data Privacy and Data Protection. Bruno? Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Enrique, for the invitation. Thank you for putting together this event. I can see here other board members. Thank you, Renata Miele, and thanks, IDP. Are we talking about risks? Yes, we are. But risks go hand in hand with harm. We have to really consider that. Today, we are celebrating really the digital ECA approval, but it's also the result of our loss because the political engine of digital ECA is the buildup of harm of children and adolescents in the digital world. I think State Representative Falca did, reported all the structural damage that we had been building up. So we really have to take it from a different perspective. Digital ECA is a major achievement, but as a society, we've failed so far. You can access the library of harm that we have prepared in our data privacy, where we list the episodes, and 21% of the reports were involving children and adolescents, involving sexual content, as well as leading to suicide attempts. Of course, it also has a role to play in the digital ECA and the subsequent enforcement initiatives. It's different from our Brazilian data privacy law or anything else, because digital ECA brings a number of prohibition, let's say non-negotiable rules. Differently from other risk-based law, I have the impression that the digital ECA brings something differently, which is a logic of prohibition. There are a number of things which are non-negotiable. Just one that we have been involved at data privacy, which is prohibition of profiling children and adolescents for directing advertising because of their cognitive vulnerability, preventing addiction and harms to children and children and adolescents. Thirdly, we've been talking about the full enforcement in steps. We have a committee formed by lawyers, and it should change the course of the regulatory affairs, which had been led by the ANPD in Brazil. Once we have an authority that is trying to strengthen the its institutional importance, at first it served as providing guidance, but now it's going into sanction against violations. And with the digital ECA, it seems to be now really in effect, because if there is a rule saying it's forbidden, there is no space for adjustment. The sanction, the penalty, will immediately result from the process of inspection and monitoring. I believe this is going to create a different logic of enforcement for ANPD agency. Why am I saying that? Once again, we've said much about implementing digital ECA in steps, and it does make sense, of course, but there are a number of self-applicable rules at digital ECA which can be subject to sanctions as of tomorrow. It applies to compliance of companies, platforms, and at the same time, uh, where are we going to focus our best efforts for educational purposes? And finally, takes me to one more point, which is combination of risk and harm, a legal remodeling of digital ECA, and that tendency of enforcement of ANPD, which Brito Cruz has pointed out, which is shared responsibility in the conception and the design of the platforms. So shared responsibility, being aware of the risks at stake, understanding the mitigation initiatives, and monitoring of those mitigating initiatives.
Another article which totally changes the regulatory format by digital ECA is Article 31, which will be for business models with a higher risk for children and adolescents, and they will be very heavy in terms of measures to be taken differently from LGPD. The expected impact assessment, they have a due time which takes place every semester, and there is no time for an infra-legal norm to think different or to set boundaries in a way which is already part of the process of digital ECA. What changes the reasoning for cognition management and risk monitoring in Brazil, which is data access forecast for journalists, academy, to understand how those business models work and to allow a more individual auditing process where the regulatory process will not just involve the regulator, such as the state members or any state authority and that business model controller, but also it will generate interesting triangulation with the society, with a network governance matter where they will expand or extrapolate the regulatory stakeholders game. So ACI, a digital ACA is very promising, but also very challenging from an implementation perspective. When will them allow data access? When will that be part of their regulatory agency? What is our ability as science in Brazil, where we'll be able to consume data and also to have a more collective auditing process? And that is aligned to what Professor Sonia said. Article 25, the general comment 25 relies on data protection, which will reduce the information asymmetry, allowing damage content, damage restraint. Within 1, 2, 3, or 4 years' time, we have to see digital ECA implementation and verify if that was indeed a mechanism for preventing damage to allow a better future in our country. Thank you. I cannot thank enough our panelists and our attendees. Let's see what is going to come next. We might have a coffee break. Let's just wait for the housekeeping messages. Once again, thank you to our participants. please stand up so we can take an official photograph. On behalf of Mr. Enrique, we would like to thank you all for your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a brief break of 15 minutes only. Please be back as quick as possible so we can keep